and Sewer Authority County to order. In fact, we do have a quorum. We have 5 in the room. We have Jeff and Randy are virtual, and based on our attorney's advice, with some clarification we got, they aren't, can't vote, aren't actually here, but are, I guess, watching as spectators. That's the ruling. We
How
haven't had this
exciting
at
for
all.
them.
That's right. And we have, Bob is out ill and, have not heard from Bob. We will get started. First item on the business is, approval of the minutes from January 18th. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Second.
All right, got a motion, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. We'll move on to some new business. Chad, you're gonna walk us through the phase 4 GMP3.
Correct, yes, sir. Glad everyone could be here tonight. It's a big day kind of for us. That's been about 4 or 5 years in the making now that this request for GMP3 for phase 4 will fully fund, if approved, the expansion of the plant to 34 million gallons a day. So this will be the final GMP for phase 4 to complete the installation of all the equipment and materials that we pre-purchased and move this project towards completion. We do have a representative from Crowder Construction here tonight, Daniel, and then also George with Brown and Caldwell is here as well tonight. So as we move through this GMP or as we talk about this, if you have any questions for them, they'd love to answer them, I'm sure. So pretty straightforward. The GMP was attached. This does, as I said, we pre-purchased a lot of equipment and a lot of materials. This GMP does still include a lot of ancillary items to complete the project. But a big chunk of this is the labor and everything to complete this project. As we've talked all along, this phase 4 is going to be more intertwined with our existing operation than phase 3 has been. So it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge for both operations and the contractor to work together and move through with this. We consider ourselves very lucky to have a contractor that we've got a great relationship with, and we've established those connections, and everybody knows everybody, and the communication has really been very, very good in WSACC's view, and I believe Daniel would second that from the contractor standpoint. So instead of going through detail, the nuts and bolts of everything that is in this GMP, I was simply going to recommend that we approve this GMP. It does, as broken out, it was just a little under 41 million is Charlotte Water's component, I believe. In total.
40.65.
Yeah, 40.6.
56.1 in total, sorry.
For this entire,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, including the other GMPs. So all total, Charlotte Water of this project is right around 56 million. They will be paying a little under 41 million of this GMP that is being considered for approval tonight. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. As I said, Daniel and George are here also to answer any questions over this GMP.
All right, any questions for Chad?
Are we still on schedule
For which one?
for where we are so far?
Yes, we are, I say yes. Originally we were, and they'll talk about that a little bit later. So, our construction project update this month is going to be done by Crowder. Just to kind of 6 months here from completion. Let's let our contractor talk with you guys of where they're at and where the bumps in the road could be as we try to finish here. Originally, we'd set a summer completion date. I think now still looking at that early fall.
Yeah.
October kind of completion date. So, all told in a 30-month project of this size, 2 months, 3 months of move on that schedule is not bad in the environment that we've been in. The great thing is with us being able to allocate the capacity before the completion of the project, then I won't say it doesn't matter. It does, but we're not waiting for that date to be able to allocate flow to a project. So that takes a little bit of that, the weight off of that date.
That's great.
Any other questions or comments? All right, do I hear a motion to approve GMP number 3 for the Rocky River Treatment Plant Phase 4 expansion?
Motion to approve.
All right, got a
Second.
motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Okay, all right, we need a budget amendment to pay for it. Anything add to that, Wendy?
The budget amendment I have before you tonight budgets the rest of the revenue bond money, the Charlotte Water money. I'm also budgeting interest revenue on these bond proceeds. We borrowed a little bit less, so, and because we knew that interest revenue would come in to also support the construction project. In total, this brings the project up to $155,390,951. So to approve the budget amendment. If there's any questions.
Any questions for Wendy? The budget amendment?
Motion to approve.
All right, got a motion,
Second that motion.
got a motion to second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries.
I also have a short presentation. I just wanted to let you know how the revenue bond sale went last week. We really hit a sweet spot and, that was some really good interest rates. There we go. So in total, the principal amount of our bonds is the 84,980,000. And then the rest of the money that we budgeted to get to our almost 95 million is 9.2 million in premium. So that is money, the face value of the bonds. Most of them are 5%. That is above what the market rate is right now. So people paid more for our bonds than the face value. So we got we got interest up front and then we will be paying that throughout the life of the bond. So what I presented last board meeting was the interest rate of 4.16%. If we'd have sold them, I guess at the last board meeting date, they were looking around for 3.81, but we actually got the true interest cost or the TIC at 3.69%, which was great because our last bonds, Michael, were what, 3.24 or 5? Yep.
And that was before all these interest rate increases we've had in the last 2 years, so. Yeah, we're surprised.
That's at a 25-year loan, and then the allocation, I'm still using the 5-year average flow. And we will have interest only payments in fiscal year 25 and 26, and then level debt service after that. And I know we talked about, so what factors, what affected the interest rate? So strong job reports, and our financial advisors also told us the supply and demand of bonds. So we were the only North Carolina seller last week, which helped us. And just overall, North Carolina is very attractive to the market because we have the LGC that approves all of our bond or issuances. And we have highly rated local governments in North Carolina. The Feds kept the interest rates between 5.25 and 5.5. That was on January 31st. The markets did react to that where interest rates went up, but it did settle by the time that we sold a week later. Inflation is slowing, but if you watch the news and we just got inflation, it's still, I guess, higher than the Feds want it. So that increased interest rates or what the bond market this week. So if we would have sold this week, we would have sold at least 5 to 10 basis points higher than what we were able to sell last week. So like I said, we really hit a good sweet spot. Unemployment also affects these and expanding economy. So this is what Michael and I were able to watch the day of the bond sale. And this is another reason supply and demand of our bonds. It's sort of hard. Can I make it bigger? Oh, is that the best? So on each of these, I think I can't see the, I should have brought a picture back. On the very last one, they made that a term bond. And they had, I think that's 18 times. It was over 18 times.
18.3.
18.3 times. So we had 18.3 times orders than we had bonds to sell for that term bond in that 4-year period. And then that makes the other ones very small, but a lot of years there's 3 times, 4 times, 8 times. So we had a lot more people that wanted our bonds than we had bonds to sell. So they were able to go back, on those 8, where we had 8 times, they decreased the interest rate that we were gonna pay that year by 8 basis points. Now, 18 times, we didn't quite get 18 times on that last year, but we did, or the last term bond, but we did get 12, so 12, basis points less. And they were able to go back and negotiate with the seller, since we had so much more people that wanted them than we had bonds to sell, we were able to pay less of an interest rate. So what this means for us, this is what I presented last board meeting at the 4.4. At that higher interest rate of 4.17, but what we're actually gonna see these first 2 years is 3.9, so over $400,000 in total will pay less per year. So we're, like I said, we're very pleased with the bond sale. And then thereafter, we were looking at about $3.4 million after that, and it'll only be, well, I say only, but look, only 6 million, a little over 6 million. Then I have, that just shows both of our revenue bonds together. So these first 2 years we'll have interest only payments. We'll be at our highest level for several years as we pay principal and interest for both of our revenue bonds. And then the first issuance will drop off in 2047. Any questions?
Comment, I will only be 102. woman.
Still be on the sport.
So I plan to be here. I'll sell it, close it out, burn the last one.
You'll be burning that note.
Yeah.
By himself.
By himself.
All right, any other questions for Wendy? All right, thank you. Good job. Good job.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, Chad, next is WSAC Facilities Plan Study Selection.
Well, I just presented on the final GMP for phase 4 of expanding to 34, so it's probably time to start the work on our next expansion. So,
Oh my gosh.
that's what we're here for. All joking aside, we have talked a little bit about this. The purpose of this study is to take the information that's coming out of the master plan, the population flow projections that we have out into the future, and to really look at both a short, medium, and long-term wastewater solutions for our county. So by that, I mean, potential short terms are maybe we can do a 1 or 2 MGD upgrade at Rocky River pretty efficiently with what we've just done. Maybe, you know, with the expansion we're looking to do potentially at Muddy Creek, you know, maybe there's some things we can do short term that are pretty cost effective or pretty streamlined to do to get some more capacity out of the system. Midterm, we're really looking at utilizing the permits that would come out of the master planning process that we're doing now for another expansion at Rocky River that would get us on down the road another 15 years or so. And then long-term, it's really planning that we have all the permits in hand for if there's the potential for siting a new plant somewhere else in the county or more extensive expansion at Rocky River, what that would look like, what that would roughly cost, you know, kind of some of the plans of that. We selected Brown and Caldwell to do this study. I think we've had a wonderful working relationship with them. They work well with our staff. Certainly have the proven expertise nationwide and locally, more importantly here locally, but nationwide as well, to really be able to take a look at creative ways to meet wastewater needs into the future. So this process of the master plan, I mean, of this facilities plan, we'll take a look at a lot of different options, short-term and long-term that we have, and kind of narrow some of those down and flush some of those out to be able to make recommendations of moving forward. And then actually begin the very preliminary processes of the design of those selected processes. So obviously the board will be kept up to date as we move forward with this, and probably quarterly, we'll probably do updates on this study. And with that, we do have George with Brown and Caldwell here. If you have any questions about what this is going to look like and how we're going to proceed, then we'd be happy to answer those questions.
Okay. Any questions?
It really is. I will specify, it's a kind of open-end study because we know we need to go somewhere, but we don't really know how we're gonna get there, you know, so we left this very much, it's a time and material contract. It's very much well, yeah, we're gonna have to kind of steer this as we go, and that's one big attraction that we have Brown and Caldwell, because we do work so well together staff-wise. And they do listen to our staff and value that input, and it's a very back and forth process as we move through it. So as we do that, there will be decisions, there will be input from the board that will be needed as we move through that, definitely.
Yeah, Chad, if the number turned out to be 50 million, do we have enough space at Rocky River that we could put in the additional equipment and processes that are necessary to treat 50 million? Or is that footprint big enough, I guess is what I'm saying? Or does that mean long-term, we might have to acquire some additional space down there in order to get all the pieces and parts on?
I mean, I think George may correct me, but I think a lot of that answer is it depends, like as we get into some of this. There could be the potential that, yes, maybe you could do it, but it may be more cost efficient. It may make more sense to do something different than to do at all at Rocky River. That's part of what's gonna be analyzed.
Right, you have a big parcel, a big site there, but the topography is not ideal for such a big expansion. It is possible though to fit a 50 MGD plant there. It is possible.
Okay.
But that's potentially part of the scope.
It is. And we're blessed in Cabarrus County kind of geographically that everything does kind of flow down to one point, which is not normally the way it works in counties and systems. Normally a system of our size that's treating 20, 30 million gallons a day would have multiple wastewater plants. And we don't because of the way our system lays out, but that doesn't mean that maybe we don't move upstream and do something different somewhere. And that's what'll be analyzed.
I anticipate that we're gonna look at other choices other than that. But as a fail-safe,
Yes.
we need to know that the property is big enough to get to whatever we're going to get approved.
Right. And I think the key to remember is we have a good receiving body to discharge to in the Rocky River here in this area. And we have a good backbone to our system. We have a good plant existing there now. So we're starting at a very good point. You know, we're not discharging it into a very small stream, very limited discharge points.
Right.
So we're at a very good point.
You're talking about the receiving stream. Is that part of this, or you seem pretty confident that that's a foregone conclusion based on your comment, but do we know that, or at what point do we verify that?
Yeah, so I mean, for example, and I know George has worked a lot at both plants, but like for Mallard Creek plant, for example, what percentage of flow are they at like the 7Q10? It's like,
98%.
Yeah. so at their 7Q10, where they're like 98%. I think at 7Q10, we're like 40% in Rocky River. So as you get further up on that, you may have more stringent discharge limits, but almost all plants are designed nowadays to meet those stringent discharge limits anyway. The biggest wild card we have out there is when we get nutrient limits. And that's one that at some point we will, we just don't know. You know, when I started here 17 years ago, they said we're about a decade out. Well, they're probably still a decade out from making a decision or more on that. So we don't know when that'll be, but that will be a big impact to us that's really out of our control once that decision's made.
So with the scope including Muddy Creek, I assume we'll be back looking at what we talked about before. Do you continue with the type of plant, or at what point do you switch over to a
Yes.
more standard plant? And
Yes. Correct.
Important step. Any other questions?
And we're doing it now.
So we need a motion to approve the scope and fee for Brown and Caldwell to perform the WSACC wastewater facilities plan study.
I move that motion.
Okay,
Second that
got a
motion.
motion second. Any questions or comments?
I will point out, I don't think I mentioned, it's about a year-long study. So just to let you know that, we're looking at about a year. That could depending on the road it takes, that could be a little longer than that, but it'll be in that order of magnitude.
And 1.65 million is a not to exceed number. So
Chad, did you say when the study would start? If we approve this tonight, when will it start?
March 1st, sir.
Yes. Let's look it up.
9 o'clock tonight. All right, got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. Okay, Thomas, you're up. Generator differential pressure equipment study and preliminary engineering report.
Yes,
I have no
sir.
idea what that is, but
First order of business is to find a shorter name for that. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, come to you tonight with kind of a continuation of a study we have already been involved with on this process. We do have an incinerator at our wastewater treatment plant at Rocky River. And along with that, we've got the emissions control equipment that we're required to have to meet our permit for air quality, those sorts of things. We do meet our state permit, so our permit is administered by the state. We do meet the terms of that permit. There is, however, some language behind that that comes from the federal, kind of the basis for that is some of the federal rules behind that. So what we are doing here, the two approaches between state and federal are a little bit different for assessing some of the same features. And what we're seeing in different parts of the state is that the state is now looking increasingly towards the federal rules as an additional measure to verify some of the same things. So we are trying with this study, what we're doing is continuing the study that we've already done a piece of it with Hazen, kind of in the beginning part. And what this will look at is a way to meet both of those sets of criteria for our system. So we're being proactive about this, getting ahead of it. And so we'll be meeting both the state rules, which we're already meeting, and the federal pieces that are increasingly coming into play as well. I'll be happy to take any questions. We did receive a statement of qualifications from Hazen for this study. They worked with us on the preliminary piece of this, and this piece of it will take it all the way to preliminary design, preliminary engineering report, all the discussions with the state that go with that, and having kind of approval of that preliminary design to then move forward into the future from there.
Thomas, does the differential have anything to do with the fact that we are in a non-attainment area here versus if we were someplace else, would the numbers be the same or would the results be the same?
That's a great question. My understanding is the federal rules are more general in nature, but they're just a different way of looking at it. So I don't think it's specific to our area.
Right, correct. It doesn't have to do with the non-attainment zone. It's just a general requirement under the EPA for multi-hearth incinerators that the state essentially didn't pick up and put in our permit. So it's a federal requirement. And what we've seen is Winston-Salem Regional Office has started enforcing this and adding it to their permits. So our goal is to be proactive instead of reactive here. We found in the normal cases, it helps us significantly when interacting with the state, when they see us being proactive instead of waiting till they catch us at something and we react to it. So we know this is something that will be coming at some point in time. So it's just getting ahead of that.
Does the differential mean a lot of extra cost? Or is it just a matter of checking boxes and submitting paperwork? Or is it actually, hey, we have to do something better out there in order to achieve the results we're looking for?
Right. So essentially what they require us to do now is during stack testing, yearly, we have to run at a higher rate,
Right.
toward the higher end of our rate. When we're running at that higher rate, as that airflow is going through that quencher, it has a pretty significant pressure drop to it.
Right.
But then when you back down and you're running in a day in and day out, say 50% capacity instead of 85% capacity, you don't have that pressure differential. So what we're gonna have to look to go to most likely is a variable throat quencher. So as you lower your airflow because you're not feeding as much sludge, the throat of your quencher decreases, so you increase your differential across there. Okay. It shouldn't really cause any increased operational cost. It's just gonna be.
I mean, just capital cost in order to make it happen.
Yes, sir, put in that variable throat in there, to be able to maintain those pressure drops at all sorts of flows. And there's an alternative monitoring plan, for the SO2 scrubber that we also reference here. And Hazen will be working with the state, to work that through. So probably, my understanding is there's not a likelihood for, modifications to the SO2 scrubber, but just getting approval to look at that in an alternate one.
Any other questions? All right, we need a motion to approve the award of this engineering study.
So moved.
Motion, I have a second. Motion, a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Mike, I was gonna ask a question about this item and the other item. Are these existing revenues to pay for both studies?
Wendy has a number 6 will address
All of that?
all that.
Okay, all right, I didn't
Wrapped
see
up
that.
in
All right,
one.
I see that one now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Good deal. All right, thank you, Thomas.
Yes, sir.
All right, you're next up, odor evaluation, odor control study.
Moving to a,
Serious studying tonight.
yes, different part of the plant for this one. So we do have an existing odor control system at the Rocky River plant. We've talked about this, I believe a few months back, a little bit in here. So we do have that existing system. That existing system will receive some upgrades with the phase 4 work, that is going through to 34 MGD. So it will receive some upgrades. We've got some additional equipment that will make some foul odors. And part of the phase 4 work is capturing those and treating those. This is a study that looks kind of at the plant as a whole, and at the surrounding WSACC interceptors that come into the plant, for their potential to generate odor and things that we might do about that. So this includes some things like sampling for odors that we have, that we're seeing out there right now. The dispersion modeling, which basically predicts with the weather and everything else, topography surrounding the site, where odors are likely to travel given the results of their sampling. And then it will look at ways to bring that direction and distance of travel in towards the plant, to minimize those. So won't be cost effective about this for sure, but just looking at being, taking that odor control study kind of to a different level and looking at the interceptors surrounding the plant and the whole of the plant. So we did receive a number of statements of qualification for this as well. We recommend moving forward with the study with Brown and Caldwell. Again, we have George here tonight, and we have their proposal in your packet for reference. I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
Any questions, Thomas?
Thomas, does the study include the option of looking at magnesium hydroxide
So
for part of the odor control solution?
sure, there could be chemical solutions such as that. And there could be some more physical or biological systems. The biological systems are kind of increasing in popularity due to lower, you don't have the chemical costs going into it.
Right.
So they'll be looking at a number of things. They're going to start with basically a picture that shows a cloud around the plant. And they'll look at different means of bringing that cloud of an odor that you could detect in closer to the source there.
And I know that the odors are not just limited to H2S, of which magnesium hydroxide would be a solution to some of that. So there's multiple odors in addition to H2S.
Yes, sir. And they'll be looking, so there's a whole family of sulfides that go into that. They'll be looking at those. H2S is something that we see kind of as a primary odor source. I've worked at several different plants as a consultant. Some have ammonia as their biggest generator, but the sulfides seem to be a key player for us.
So when you see an airport do a noise study, ultimately, and end up with acquisitions, do you ever with the odor studies end up with acquisitions? Find a place where the odors are just, you can't disperse them?
I have not seen that in my career. George, have you seen actually buying property to, because you couldn't control odor more cost effectively?
Well, the problem is, I haven't seen that. We see more and more The opposite where, treatment plants were built out in no man's land and everything developed around them. So you have a pretty big property there. Please help mitigate odors and not let them move. But we have deforestation too for development, so it will be difficult to just buy property just for that reason only.
And there is, I guess, unlike an airport, there are some cost-effective ways of mitigating noise. I mean, a jet's gonna have, you know, the sound it has.
Yeah.
But we've got some options.
We have received some complaints and verified those through some studies, right?
Yes, we have not in recent months, but, or in the past couple months, but we have in the past. And there are some weather phenomena that make it, seem to make it worse. For example, in the spring, when you get the warm days, the cool nights, kind of like we have it right now. You can get some of that, that the odors kind of hang, in certain areas more than they do otherwise. So we are going to do our best to hit those times during the year with the sampling effort so that we can get a worst case, picture to feed into this.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, we need another motion to award this engineering study.
So moved.
A motion?
Second.
Second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. All right, now how we pay for it.
Yeah. And, so I just brought one budget amendment for all three studies, so we'll appropriate almost $2 million to pay for all three of these studies.
I'll make a motion that we pay for what we just approved. And pass this budget amendment.
Have a budget amendment so I can pre-audit.
I'll second the motion.
All right, got a motion to approve the ordinance to amend the budget. And a second, any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. Okay, financial reports, move on, yep.
I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, any questions from Wendy on the financial report that she provided? Hearing none, we will move on. If you have any follow-up questions, I'm sure Wendy or Mike will be able to answer to it another time. All right. Thomas,
Yes, sir.
what's the plan update?
I will not stay at the podium this time, but I will introduce Daniel. Daniel has a presentation and, he and I, also here. We're happy to answer any questions you might have that he goes through.
Appreciate you guys having me today. My name is Daniel Passione. I work for Crowder Construction. So I'm one of the project managers out on site. All right, so going through the previous month's update here. So we continued with the electrical and HVAC equipment installation at the blower building. We continued working on the air piping and placement of the blowers at the blower building. Actually got those set this month and for the most part finished the piping inside. We completed the excavation and underslab piping at the thickened solids pump station. Continued to expose electrical and mechanical at the WAS pump station. Also started HVAC there as well this week. Continued installing exposed piping mixers, electrical equipment at the EQ tank number 1. We placed the NEF blower pad at EQ tank number 1. Continued installing the 42-inch line to the EQ influent meter ball. That was a big step for us. We actually finished that up this week. It's under test. Set the aluminum covers at both meter vaults. And then in general, we've continued to mitigate issues sourcing equipment on phase 3 in the electrical upgrades project. That's, I guess, really speaks to what Chad was saying earlier. That's been our biggest challenge from a schedule standpoint. Here to date, we have a few pieces of major gear that have been delayed in manufacturing. We do have confidence, I say that hesitantly, but we do have confidence in where they're at now. We've actually been in touch with the facilities that are manufacturing these, seen pictures. We actually got one that shipped out earlier this week. So we feel like we're in a much better position than we have been over the summer where we were kind of at, or excuse me, the fall and winter where we're kind of at an unknown place with when these, we're gonna start in production. We now know that everything we need is in production at a minimum. And we have, you know, an end in sight to having these pieces of equipment on site. Going through the pictures here, this kind of illustrates some of the upgrades we just talked, or updates we just talked about. This is the pad for the NEF blowers at the EQ tank. So we made pretty good progress there this month. Finished all the under slab electrical. Actually placed the slab, we set the blowers and the stair tower getting on top of the EQ tank. This week, we even continued with the stainless piping, got pretty good headway on that. It's not pictured here. This is some pictures from up on top of the EQ tank. We did some of the interior work on the EQ tank this month. That is the overflow pipe that you see there in red. And you also see the bases for the mixers that go in there that are being installed. We also placed most of the electrical equipment up on the walk platform this past month. These are some pictures of EQ Basin 6. Not a ton has gone on in the EQ Basin. We've been done with the majority of construction there for a while now. We have been finishing up the electrical terminations, installation of instruments. It's hard to show progress on that, but there is progress that has been made. The substations that are pictured in front of the aeration basin were pretty well underway there. We are waiting for one of the components we're waiting on is related to that. This is some picture of the interior of the blower building. That's the electrical room. You can see the low voltage switchgear that's in there. This is the back side of the blower building where we completed all the phase 3 piping. And what's not pictured further to your right is where we'll expand in phase 4 with the rest of that piping. This is an update from last month's progress to this month's progress inside the blower building. As mentioned, we set the blowers and piping in place. We've got most of the electrical roughing done to those blowers as well, but that is not complete yet. Will be complete this coming month. This is at the gravity thickeners as well as the thick and solids pump station. We finished the excavation in January. This month we started on the base foundation, got all the under slab piping. We've formed up the slab on grade. Our electricians are currently in there roughing in all the electrical conduit. We plan to place that next week. This is the maintenance canopy and some site work depicted. Maintenance canopies have been done for the most part. That's kind of in a punch list phase here. We're really just waiting on electrical box before we can get the lights turned on there, but for the most part that is done. Getting close to being ready to turn over. This is a picture inside those substations next to the aeration basin. You can see we completed a lot of the landing of major electrical wiring. Again, continued site work here. We've started on a lot of the site improvements now that we're for the most part out of the ground. The picture on the left is of the RS piping that I mentioned we completed this past month. That was a pretty big milestone for us. That mostly gets us out of the ground on the project, which was another risk that we're happy to be past. We got to finish testing on that, so fingers crossed everything goes well there, but we're in good shape. Planned work for the next month, we'll continue installing installation and pulling wire at the blower building. Should be in good shape, just waiting on electrical gear for that after this coming month. HVAC at the blower building and WAS pump station, those should be at a good point by the end of this next month. Continue exposed lighting and electrical at the EQ basin and NEF tank. Again, we're in very good shape there. That should be close to finishing up in this next coming month. Mixers will be installed over the next month. Blowers and piping will be complete over the next month. We'll install the instruments and pull wire at the influent meter vaults. For the most part, that's well underway. That's a very minor component, but is progress. 42-inch line, like I said, we're gonna finish testing there. We'll start the walls and finish at the thick and sludge pump station. That's gonna be a heavy area that we're gonna be working on over the next several months. We'll continue leak testing the gravity thickeners. We actually finished number 3 this week. That went very well. We're moving on to number 4. And then we've got a platform to install out to box 8, which was raising the flood. I think Thomas showed a picture of that a couple months ago, but raising the floodplain down there on the bottom side of the plant. And then we have a few small buried piping lines that are they're relatively minor, but are going to be needed for these expansion that we'll work on. That's it for my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions? Good update. Thank you. Great. Appreciate all your work. All right, Thomas, master plan update.
Sure. So, earlier this month, on February 7th, so I guess that was last week, we had a meeting, with the member jurisdiction staff, and with Charlotte Water staff as well out at the plant. So we had, I think, upwards of 30 people, all in attendance, to review the master plan, efforts so far, the flow projections, the, water resources analysis, all that sort of thing, the capital improvement, program, all those things, to review that in one presentation, with member jurisdiction staff and Charlotte Water staff. I believe that went, well overall. Some work that is continuing, so they're wrapping up kind of the documentation piece for a lot of the master plan. But some work that is continuing, of course, the MPDES permits, or a permit beyond 34 MGD, they are now doing the model runs that it takes to get speculative limits. So you asked earlier about 40 MGD and 50 MGD. They are doing the spec limit runs to submit that to the state to get limits at 40 speculative limits, at 40 MGD and at 50 MGD. That does not mean that we're tied to an expansion to directly 40 and directly 50, but it means that we can kind of work within those parameters and request limits for a more specific place from there. And that will give us a good feel for what the requirements would be at each of those milestones. They are also continuing work on some interactive dashboards. So these are web-based sorts of things. One is for our capital improvement program. That one is nearly complete. Flow allocation is also nearly complete. So with that, that is a map-based system where you can see all the developments that have flow allocation. You can click on it, get the most updated numbers for a particular development to see where it was originally, where it is now, that sort of thing. And then the last dashboard they're working on is one for flow monitoring. So that's probably the most complicated one overall that they're working on. We're working with them to make sure they've got the right peaking factors, that all that is kind of understandable and defensible throughout, so that we can look at flows in individual areas and see what's going on in individual sub-basins out there. So they're continuing to work on the dashboards and the permit. They're wrapping up the documentation otherwise. So I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Thomas about the master plan? All right, good deal. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I would like to mention that I talked to the chairman. We would like to do about an hour presentation at the March meeting. So plan on the meeting be a bit longer than normal. We're gonna have customized presentation for the board before we roll it out to the elected officials and the jurisdictions, but we feel like we need to present the information to you first before we roll it out. So we'll have a estimated hour-long presentation on the master plan and all the documentation inside, and let you see some of the information that Thomas is talking about, some of the dashboards and things that are available for the staff of the jurisdictions to use in the future.
Are we thinking, I don't know if you and I talked about this, are we thinking after that's done to go jurisdiction by jurisdiction, or is there any merit in having maybe at one of the county summit meetings to present to everybody at once? And problem with that is everybody doesn't show up, so you're more likely to get all elected officials going jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but.
I mean, our experience through this has been, if you have one jurisdiction in the room that you're talking with, they're more free to ask, they feel more free to ask questions than if everyone's there, they maybe don't feel quite as free. And you get the most out of this if it's interactive. If there's some back and forth to it, you get the most out of it. So that would be what I would consider.
cross that bridge later, but that sounds good. All right, public comments. Anybody here would like to address the board on any matter? And hearing none, we need a closed session. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session under GS 143, 318, 11A1, A3, and A6.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Second, any discussion, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?